Susan, thank you for the introduction. Thank you to everyone for the warm welcome. I have been accused of being a quiet talker in the past, so if you can't hear or if I end up talking like this a little bit, just shout out. I can't hear you. But seriously, I've said this to a number of you just in the last half hour or so. Please ask questions. Please challenge me. What I'm going to take you guys through is relatively new, not only to Clear Channel, but to the out-of-home media industry. And as you launch any kind of innovation, I'm always sensitive to talk about what we do as innovation because it sounds like you're so innovative. But this is innovation in the space, and anytime you bring out something like that, there is a process of evolution and iteration on that, and that comes from feedback. So please do ask questions. Please let us know what you think. Hopefully I can live up to what Susan said of taking something that is relatively complex and making it not just understandable, but meaningful for all of you guys. To echo what Susan said, we appreciate the business. We appreciate the opportunity to work with all of you and your clients, and I appreciate the opportunity to come out here and speak to you. So, let's see if this works. All right, so in a nutshell, what I'm here to talk to you guys about today is a pretty simple concept, which is the idea that out-of-home works. Right? Out-of-home is one of those inescapable mediums. There are so many brands like Coca-Cola that have built their brand by leveraging out-of-home. Marlboro and other tobacco brands so successfully used out-of-home that the federal government actually banned us from working with that anymore. It was so successful, right? There's a real powerful history in this space. There are images, I'm just going to flip through some of them now, that are just sort of burned into the American consciousness. These brands have existed for so long and built their history and their relationship with their customers based on the use of out-of-home. Some of it is just very clever, like that. Others are just sort of iconic images that are part of the landscape that we all know. And brands have been built, literally, by using out-of-home. So everyone thinks of Apple today as this unbelievably successful business, but if you go back to when they were talking about the iMac, they were a challenger brand. They were left behind by the Microsofts of the world, and they effectively used out-of-home to rebuild the brand and to create not just brand awareness, product awareness, but a meaning. And they're one of the biggest users of out-of-home to the point where this campaign, the Shot an iPhone 6 campaign, won the biggest award at the Cannes Lions last year. And I want to point out, by the way, no digital out-of-home at all in this. This is traditional out-of-home, printed posters hung up around the world, building the brand and building awareness of what the iPhone can do. Beyond the apples, though, this is one of my favorite campaigns I've used out-of-home over the last few years for Snickers, in that they recognize the unbelievable power of out-of-home, even without a brand. If you look at this campaign, there is no Snickers up there. What they were recognizing is that quick hit, that quick read that you get from out-of-home can really effectively communicate what a brand needs to get across, even without the logo, even without any call to action. And this is my favorite one that's currently running right now. Does anyone know the brand here? Someone said Snapchat. Yeah, there you go. So the hottest brand right now in digital and mobile, the hottest brand in advertising, quite frankly, is using traditional out-of-home to communicate with their customers. Right? The users of Snapchat get this. If you're a 50-year-old old fart like me, you don't get this unless someone explains it to you. My 18-year-old son gets this, right? This is connecting the brand, connecting the app with the communities and the people who are using the app by focusing on the geo-filters that are offered to be able to personalize your photos and share those photos. Again, no digital here. This is recognizing that out-of-home is a powerful medium. And it's a medium that really has defined culture over the years. Love this shot. From like these rock and roll billboards. There's actually a book, if you guys haven't seen it, it's a really cool book about the rock and roll billboards of Sunset Strip in Los Angeles. These kinds of images, whether it's the Beatles, or in this case, how Nike has used out-of-home throughout the Olympics. They're not an Olympic sponsor. And so they've ambushed the Olympics by using out-of-home to present the message in the market that they are the brand that you should think about. Really effective for them. To this one, which Warner Brothers used to launch one of the Batman movies. These are iconic images that really make out-of-home and brands part of the conversation. And obviously, with the election that's going on right now, I just had to show this one. The connection locally of out-of-home is really powerful. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this one before. I show this in every meeting. I love this. The ability to connect a brand message with a physical environment around it is only something that can happen without a home. Or connecting the message to another business. I don't know if you guys can all read this, but California Pizza Kitchen, just in case you get any barbecue chicken pizza on your shirt, above a dry cleaner. Really clever. Or the ultimate local, brands that aren't necessarily known outside of a market are part of the conversation, are part of the community by leveraging out of home. And they're certainly part of the perception of the market and the brands in the market. Out of home has also been able to break boundaries, whether it's physical boundaries like Apple's use of 2 buildings across the street from each other, or this kind of installation, which is in Dallas, which really just brings a brand to life in a way that you just can't through some other media. And then finally with digital, the possibilities are so different today. So Coca-Cola has had a lot of success by leveraging digital out of home, in this case for their Share a Coke campaign, where Coke fans and just consumers around the country were able to share their photos, share their names, and see their names and their images in lights on digital billboards around the country. Closer to home, this was a fantastic campaign that we ran with Target that, among other things, was an opportunity to reinvent the newspaper freestanding insert, to take the value of what you get from an FSI at a time when people aren't really reading the newspaper. Sorry, I'm bringing up an old client for our friends in it was a brilliant campaign in that it was real time featuring the products that that Target wanted to feature in each market, tied to each store, with mobile geofencing of ads supporting that, so that that ad message was delivered not only on out of home, but reinforced on mobile, something I'll come back to later. So, long, fun way of kicking off saying that we all know that out of home works. It's got an impact that you can't get from other media. It's unskippable. There's no bots, there's no fraud, there's no ad blockers. You have the ability to reach broad audiences and really connect to locations like no other media. But you knew there was a however, right? The reality is it's 2016. And digital, I think this word should be banned from the media industry because everything is digital today. And digital is a game changer. Digital is changing everything we do in the way that we do it. And one of the reasons for that is because it allows advertisers to think about audiences and how you can effectively target audiences by leveraging data and by understanding what happens after exposure. And so the challenge that we put to ourselves in the last year was, we all know that out-of-home works in here. And we all know that out-of-home works if you go down to Mayo Clinic Square and see the kind of experience that we can bring brands to life there, or if you go to Sunset Strip or you go to an airport, you all get it. But we gotta prove it. And so the challenge of proving that out-of-home works is what led to what you guys all came out to today to hear about, which is what we're calling Clear Channel Outdoor Radar. So this is what drives radar, mobile data. Everyone is carrying around one of these supercomputers in your pocket, right? And there is this unbelievable ecosystem of data that comes off of mobile and that comes from the way that people use their devices. So let me ask you guys a question. Has anyone ever left their house in the morning and then you realize you forgot your phone? Anyone? What do you do?
Turn around.
Exactly. You freak out, you turn around, you immediately go back and get it. Your phone has become a proxy for you. And because of the data that comes off of the phones and the way that you use it, and the way that advertising and content are delivered, and the way that people use apps, we now have the ability to understand people's behavior, people's movements, based on their phones as a proxy for who they are. And that was the insight that led to our creation of Radar. By following the trails that your mobile devices leave, and understanding, among other things, the billboards that you're exposed to, and the places that you visit, we have the ability to understand consumer behavior like never before. So, what is Radar? This is kind of the elevator pitch slide here. Radar is our use of mobile data to understand the people who are in front of billboards, how to select the billboards most effectively to reach those audiences, and then how to understand what happens after exposure to advertising on billboards. That's pretty much it. That's the pitch right there. In and of itself, I think that is, as Susan mentioned, I used to be on the client side. I used to love out-of-home at WWE. If anyone wants to hear stories about wrestling, see me afterwards. But I used to use out-of-home consistently. Anytime we're in the market with advertising, I would be buying out-of-home. But I was buying it based on gut. I was buying it based on a sense of where makes sense. What are the markets that make sense to us? or do we want to buy around sporting arenas because you'll be sports fans who are into wrestling, things like that. If I had access to what we can do today with radar back then, it would have been a game changer for us, and we hope it could be a game changer for you guys. So I'm going to walk you through in a little bit more detail what radar is, but first what I want to address is what it's not. Radar is not a replacement for the audience measurement currency we have in the out-of-home industry that comes from the TAB, the Traffic Audit Bureau, which is soon to be branded as Geopath, which is such a better name than the Traffic Audit Bureau. Every medium needs a currency. Every medium has a currency. Whether that currency is the best cutting-edge measurement or not is immaterial, because what it does is it gives all of us an objective currency to compare one option against another. We are not in any way trying to replace the TAB. We are full support of the TAB. I'm on the board of the TAB. It is something that we really believe in. What radar is a data layer on top of that. What radar does is it gives us the ability to understand on a more granular level the kinds of people that you can reach with out-of-home. And like I mentioned, attribution is really critical, how we prove that it works. What we've done with radar is build the solution through partnerships with a handful of companies. Many of them I've listed up here. I hope there's a familiarity with some of these companies in the room. PlaceIQ is one of the largest mobile data companies that are out there. They started out in the business of delivering mobile ads and quickly realized that the real value that they offered wasn't the ads, it was the data that they can glean and the insights they can glean from those ads. They're a big partner of ours. I'll explain more what we do with them in a bit. AT&T is a big partner of ours with the ability to understand cellular data and what that applies as far as people's movement in the world. Very powerful tool. INRIX is a big data company that focuses on connected vehicles. And so obviously with out-of-home and out-of-home audiences, so many of those audiences are reached while you're in the car. INRIX gives us the ability to understand movement of vehicles, speed of vehicles, how they move about their day, and I'll share with you what we've done with them from an attribution perspective in a little bit. And then finally, Placed is a company. I've actually had a couple of conversations today where people are aware of them. Placed operates the largest opt-in panel of people who are willing to do research on mobile devices. So you can download an app. If you haven't, I would encourage you to. The Placed app gives you the ability to take surveys and answer questions. You can win prizes and do things like that. But what it gives Placed and their partners like us is the ability to understand movement and behavior, because every one of their panels, 1.3 million people, have volunteered to allow their devices to be tracked. And it gives us a really deep understanding of consumer behavior and movement. So the ecosystem, the radar ecosystem, 3 components to it, and it all starts with the mobile device and how people interact with billboards. And from that, we've built 3 primary areas of value. One is audience planning. So understanding the audiences that you want to reach and how you can most effectively reach them through out-of-home media. Attribution, like I talked about, what happened after exposure? Did it work, and how do we measure that? And then finally, mobile amplification. And I'll come back to that in a second, but the idea there is if you're planning your audiences and trying to target those audiences by understanding mobile data, and you're thinking about location-based marketing, you're thinking about reaching people in specific locations, you have to be thinking about both mobile and out-of-home holistically. You have to think of it together, and we have solutions that allow you to do that through Clear Channel. So, I want to talk a little bit and take a little bit of a step back on how out-of-home media can be planned and bought and sold. And what I want to do is start with what you already do and what you already know. 2 primary ways that out-of-home has been bought over the years. The first is by location. Unbelievably powerful way to use out-of-home. The best example of that, they're literally in the Out-of-Home Hall of Fame, is Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel for years has bought their media in one way. They want to buy billboards that are near the exit off the highway that leads to their store. And they're unbelievably successful doing that. Buying based on location is incredibly powerful. You can look around this city and find lots of opportunities to say, my business is here, a board is here, it makes sense for me to promote using that location. Right? Very powerful. You can also plan and buy based on demographics. So the TAB gives us age, gender, ethnicity, income, things like that, that allow you to be really smart about board selection. So you can buy based on targeting Hispanic neighborhoods, African American audiences. You can buy based on boards that deliver more of a female audience or male audience. Demographics are a really powerful way also. What I tell my team, and what we talk about internally though, is think about radar like a toolbox. And just like in the real world, you don't just hit everything with a hammer. You need sometimes to use a screwdriver, sometimes to use pliers, right? You need different tools for different situations. What radar does is adds a different tool to the toolbox And now what it is behavioral targeting, targeting audience segments. One is not better than the other. And in fact, what we talk about internally is this idea of a multi-pass approach to planning. Whether you start with the location, the demographics, or the behavioral audience, all of them are important. And what we're doing with Radar is bringing to you guys a solution to hopefully help you do a better job of understanding the audience that we can deliver, and really importantly, giving our sellers, your business partners, the ability to work with you more closely on finding those right solutions. So we're going to dive into what we mean by behavioral targeting and how it works. Any questions before I dive into that? Feel free to interrupt me if there are things. All right, here's how it works. I mentioned Place IQ before. Place IQ has access to a tremendous amount of data based primarily on the way that advertising is delivered to cell phones. Every time an ad is delivered to a cell phone, there's GPS information that comes from the GPS chip on the device. So you know where that device is. There's a lot of bad location data out there. And so one of the reasons we work with Place IQ is to do a fantastic job cleaning that data and making sure that if an ad says that it's being delivered to someone here, we want to make sure that it is actually where they say it is. In other words, clean location data is really important. What we do is work with Place IQ to say, let's look at where people go. Let's look at where their devices are found because an ad is delivered to them there. So the best example I can give is a car dealership. So my wife and I are in the market for a car. We're at the car dealer. We're waiting for the salesperson to come over and tell me why he can't give me the price that I want. And so I open up my phone and I launch Words with Friends, and it serves me an ad. When that ad is served, they know that it's served at the latitude and longitude of where that dealer is. And what Place IQ does is connects that information to points of interest, specific places that people go. And so because that device was found in a car dealership, it's logical to assume that I'm in the market for a car, because why else would you go to a car dealership unless you work there? So the overwhelming majority of people who are served an ad at a car dealership, you can aggregate them up into a group of people who are auto intenders, people who are in the market for a car. If your device is seen at Whole Foods, you're a Whole Foods shopper. If it's seen in a movie theater, you go to the movies, and so on. And so what we do with Place IQ is say, let's look at that behavior, those locations that we find people, and anonymously and in the aggregate, roll those people up into audience segments, people who shop at Whole Foods, whatever they may be. We then look at those audiences. How do they move about their day? What is that consumer journey? Where do they go as a group? Not individuals. We're not tracking people. We're not tracking individuals. We're not following people. But people who share the same behavior, how do they move about their day and where do they go? And importantly, what billboards do they go past? Because what this allows us to do is effectively score all of our inventory against these audience segments. And it gives us the ability to share with you, if you're trying to target people, for example, who are in the market for a car, this location versus this location versus this location, which are relatively better than the others as far as efficiently delivering that audience. The output of Radar for audience planning, I wish it was more complex than this. It's not very sexy, it's indexes. That's what it comes down to, is saying the audience segments that you want to reach, based on that behavioral mobile data, what are the best locations for us to reach them? Does that make sense? I'll show what it looks like visually. And this may not necessarily be easy to see in the back of the room, but what we're showing here is Los Angeles. Every pin that's on this map represents a piece of inventory that Clear Channel has in Los Angeles. A bulletin, a poster, a digital bulletin, street furniture, whatever it may be. What we're showing here is color-coded rankings of each piece of inventory based on its ability to deliver people who go to movies, right? And now I gotta turn around and see. The red is the higher index, and the blue and purple are the lower indexes. This in and of itself isn't that valuable because it's just a lot of stuff up there. But if you're trying to reach people who go to the movies and focus just on the boards that index high, now it starts to help you with the understanding of which inventory is best to reach that audience. This is Chicago, all of our inventory in Chicago. The rankings here are based on auto intenders. And if you look at the boards that only index high for auto intenders, you start to see a more manageable selection of inventory. And I'm going to walk you through a couple of use cases to illustrate how this can be done. But first, what I want to do is contrast what I showed you with another piece of information that many of you already may use, and we certainly use at Clear Channel, which is using TAB data and census data and Scarborough or other syndicated tools to understand a behavior that people claim. So let me explain what I mean by that. Scarborough, does everyone know and use Scarborough as a syndicated research tool? MRI works in the same way. It's survey-based. People are asked to fill out surveys and say who you are, what you do, where you shop, what you buy, and as part of that, among other things, they'd say, are you going to buy a car in the next 6 months? Well, if the morning you're filling out that survey, your car broke down, you're probably going to say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to buy a car in the next 6 months. And that's important information, but that's different from your device being seen at a car dealership in the last 30 days, which is what we're talking about with the radar data. It's the difference between reported data and observed data. And what it also is a differentiation between where people move throughout the day and where they live. Because what Scarborough and census data tells us is where you are home-based, where you live. But our medium, by nature, is out of home, right? And so we want to be able to share with you, as your advertising partners, information not just about where these people live, which is valuable, but where they go and how they move and what their daily journey looks like. And so the map that I'm showing, there are shaded areas. Those are showing the areas based on Scarborough data and census data of where people live, indexed against auto intenders. In other words, if you're focusing on the zip codes to reach people in the market for a car, this is where you place your advertising. And it's powerful, it's valuable stuff. The little red dots are based on the radar data and the indexes of where people move about, auto intenders, how you can reach them throughout the day. And what this shows you is the census data is actually good data. There's a lot of these shaded areas where you see a lot of red pins there. To us, what that means is the data is validated. What it also shows is there's a lot of red pins somewhere else. Because if you think about it, buying a car is about as far from an impulse purchase as there is, right? If all you're doing is advertising around the dealership, you're missing a big opportunity, which is that people have to get to the dealership. And they have to go through that consideration period where you go from I'm thinking about buying a car to I'm serious about buying a car to I'm going to start looking at different cars to, oh my God, we're buying a car. Well, that consumer journey happens in every category. It's easiest understood with something like buying a car and auto intenders, but it applies to everything, whether you're deciding where to go to dinner, deciding whether to go to movies, or what kind of products to buy at the grocery store. What this illustrates is the combined power of targeting based on the demographics and the behavioral data. So where we are right now with Radar, we launched this about 4 months ago as kind of a proof of concept. And what we mean by that is we launched 14 audience segments, the ones that I'm showing here, that were built against our inventory in 11 markets, our roadside inventory in 11 markets. In other words, we have indexes for these 14 audiences in the top 11 DMAs for our billboards. And what we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 months is rolling it out, testing it with clients, seeing what the response is. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. There's real interest. And the reason we're sharing that with you is because we just literally last week received data for 1,800 audience segments against all of our roadside inventory in all of our markets, including, obviously, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so within the next month or so, we'll be releasing that data, which will allow all of you to work with the team here to understand who your customer is. How do you target them currently with your marketing and your advertising? What's the best way to reach them through out of home? And through the combination, remember the 3-circle slide of location, demographics, and behavioral? Based on those 3 different ways that we can pull the data together and help you with the planning, what are the most effective ways to deliver your audience? Now, I mentioned 14 audiences going to 1,800 audiences. I'm going to flip through this really quickly. Don't worry about this. I think you each have a handout of this. These are some of the audiences that we'll be offering up for that audience segmentation of our inventory. And it is very deep, very granular. It allows you to target based on some behaviorally derived demographic segments, as well as targeting specific categories broadly, as well as specific branded retailers. So you have the ability to use this data to target your audience, target your current customers, target your competitors' customers, or look at proxies for your audience based on other behavior and based on this segmentation, and I'm going to keep clicking because there's a bunch of them. Work with us and say what's the best way for out of home to deliver the solutions that you need and reach the audience that you need. And I'm going to click a whole lot quicker because I think I made the point. Very deep, rich audience segmentation that hopefully gives you a much granular understanding of how you can use the medium. Let's talk use cases. 2 that I want to walk you through. The first is building custom campaigns, and the second is understanding the audiences from specific inventory, because both apply the way that we work with you and then you work with us. So I apologize, the room is kind of big for these next couple slides, but I'll walk you through it. This is looking at, in Dallas as a market, all the locations for McDonald's. Every one of those green pins is a McDonald's location in Dallas. So the first takeaway from this for me was, oh my God, I had no idea there were so many McDonald's in Dallas. If you've ever worked on QSR business, especially with franchisees, you know that there are some very specific requirements that the franchisees have to authorize the advertising that happens in the market. And one of them is making sure that all franchisees benefit, right? Which is why so many franchise businesses use things like radio and TV, because everybody in the market has the ability to see or hear it. However, we all know that people aren't watching TV anymore, and when they're watching TV, they're skipping ads or avoiding ads. So how does a brand like McDonald's more effectively use out of home to make sure they're reaching the right customer and covering the needs of all of those franchisees? So we start with the locations. And typically what you do in the QSR business is say, well, let's look at a proximity. So in this case, 2 miles from a McDonald's store. And so, and I'm going to turn around here. Everything other than the green ones is inventory that Clear Channel can offer in Dallas. That's within 2 miles of a McDonald's store. It's a lot of inventory. Let's dive a layer deeper in this. Let's only look at the inventory that indexes at a 120 or higher for QSR customers, meaning which inventory is 20% more likely or greater than that. I don't shop there, I'm not a customer. If you knew that, you wouldn't want to waste your time and effort advertising to me, right? You want to advertise to people who are more likely to be interested in what you're selling. So this shows the inventory indexes at a 120 or higher. But we go back to the challenges with franchisees and covering everyone. As you can see, that doesn't cover everyone. Well, with franchisee business, and especially QSRs like McDonald's, one of the reasons for that is most Americans go to McDonald's, right? A lot of people go to McDonald's. So in this case, what we'd say is, maybe 120 is too high of an index. Let's instead look at inventory that indexes above the average, and it gives us more to work with. But then, let's say the brand says, my message is really important to me, and I want a big canvas for that. I want to be able to deliver that in a large format. So we say, okay, well, let's take those boards that index at 100 or higher, that are within a 2 mile proximity, and only look at the bulletins. And now what this does is it gives us a much deeper list of inventory to work with. But we're talking about a brand like McDonald's. And just because a board index is high doesn't mean it's necessarily the right board for your campaign. So this is when I bring back the center circle, the demographics, right? So here what we say is, well, let's only look at bulletins that deliver an audience of at least 500,000 impressions per month. Scale, because that's what a brand like McDonald's needs, especially with that kind of footprint. And what we end up here is a very different type of campaign than you would if you just said, I want 2 mile proximity. Especially keeping in mind that when you're traveling around a market like Dallas, you don't just go to the McDonald's within 2 miles of where you are. You're traveling about your day, whether it's going to or from work, whether you're going somewhere with your kids, you have an opportunity to deliver those reminders, but you want to deliver those reminders to people who are most likely to be receptive to that message. I'll show you another example, which is audience-based. So, Chicago, and I apologize, I don't have the Minneapolis data just yet to show you, so we're working with Chicago thinking it's a close market. But Chicago, all of our inventory. This is all of our inventory that indexes at a 120 or higher for auto intenders, right? So we're getting a little bit more targeted. And now we say, well, our client is GM. Let's look at Chevy dealerships. What this is showing is Chevy dealerships in proximity to the boards that index at a 120 or higher. What it gives us is the ability to target very specific. I'm going to come back to this map in a little later to continue the story. But again, whether you start with geo-targeting, audience targeting, or in this case, behavioral targeting, this tool gives us the ability to be smarter about the way that we come back to you and share with you what the right solutions are, the best solutions are. I'll show you another use case. And I don't know if you guys have done this, but I certainly do this when I was on the client side and now Clear Channel. You go through a market and you see a board, and you say, that's a great location. Is that a good location for me or my clients? Whether it's currently has an ad on it or it's available, sometimes you want to understand a specific location and the audience delivered. And so what Radar does is gives us the ability to dive deep into one location and say, who's the audience that's delivered best by that location? Again, apologize, this is a little small, These are the 14 audience segments that we talked about with the indexes for a board on the Long Island Expressway in New York. This is a large bulletin, delivers nearly 300,000 impressions per month on a very busy road. Delivers a lot of audience. It isn't the right audience for you. And what this shows is, not surprisingly, it's on a large arterial route. It tends to deliver a lot of different types of consumers. But if you look over to the right side of the chart, you see that there's one section that really pops, and that's QSR. And so if you have a client in the QSR space, or if that's your brand, or you have a product or a service that you want to offer up to people who like fast food, what this would do is give you the ability to say, well, this board delivers a lot of people in high volume. It's especially efficient at delivering that QSR customer. Different example. This is a small, off-the-beaten-track poster in Dallas. Unlike the prior one that delivered about 300,000 impressions, this delivers about 20,000 impressions, right? Who does this appeal to? Who should buy this poster? Well, there's a lot of brands that would look at this and say, because of the location, it doesn't really work for me. You see the one line that's really popping? That's for NCAA basketball fans. Not surprisingly, this is near a university that has a competitive basketball team. I think it's SMU. And so what this does is it helps us understand the value of that inventory, but also you understand the value of that inventory. So if you're targeting basketball fans, either because you're a university, or you're an NBA team, or you're a sporting goods store, or you know that your product, because of the analysis you've done of MRI or other tools, overlaps with people who are into college basketball, what you know is, even though this isn't a huge audience delivered by this poster, it's the right audience. That index is off the charts. It's about 170 index. So what this does is it gives you and us a much more granular understanding of pieces of inventory and how they deliver effectively for you. All right. Any questions about audience planning, what we just went through? I'm going to keep going then. Attribution. How do you know it works? We have 3 use cases that I want to explain to you. The first is brand metrics. So it's kind of survey data, awareness, recall, purchase intent, word of mouth, things like that. Second is store visits, where with mobile data we can actually understand where people go after exposure to advertising. And then, I don't know if it applies much in this room, but through a relation with AT&T, we can actually look at advertising exposure and does it impact people's TV viewing behavior. Here's how it works. First one is surveys. I mentioned a company, Placed. You guys are familiar with Placed? Anyone's worked with Placed in the past? You know, guys at Hayworth were saying they had. Placed is a great company, a great partner of ours who's also working with a lot of brands directly and a lot of agencies directly. The 1.3 million people that I mentioned that are part of their panel that downloaded their app, what we have the ability to do is not only understand where they go, but to push them surveys. And so what we've done with Placed and our other partners is incorporate an understanding of directional movement into the way that they work with their customers and work with the data. And what I mean by that is, let's say this is a board and it's on a highway. Proximity of the board is really meaningless, right? Because if the facing is this way and traffic is going this way and you're going the opposite way, it doesn't matter that you're near the board, you didn't see the board, right? You have to be moving in the right direction to be exposed to the message there. And so with Placed and our other partners, we've incorporated that understanding of directional movement and exposure, which gives us the ability to say, let's look at the market and divide people into 2 groups. Those that were exposed to the advertising and those that weren't. And we understand that because partners like Placed have the ability to track movement of their panelist devices and see where they're moving in the right direction, on the right routes to be exposed to that ad. And what we do is simply push out surveys to the 2 groups, the exposed and the unexposed. The same survey, we see what the difference is. And so what we come back with is a measure of lift that's attributable to the out-of-home exposure. Because the only difference between those 2 groups is one was exposed and one was not. And I'll show you a case study in a second of how we've done that. The second is actual store visitation. So with Placed, with INRIX, with Place IQ, we have the ability to not only separate the groups into exposed and not exposed, but to watch and see what happens after exposure. And so what we can do is compare the 2 groups and see, was the exposed group more likely to actually visit your store? So we did a study recently with a large QSR brand working with INRIX, the big data company that focuses on connected cars. And what we were able to say is, Let's look at people who drove past a billboard and compare them to those that didn't drive by a board with the QSR brand on there. And we saw a significant lift in visits to the parking lots of the QSR locations amongst the exposed consumers versus those that were not. Now, it's not the same as being able to say what the sales data is, but in all likelihood, if you've driven and parked at a parking lot of a fast food restaurant, you're going in, right? So it's very meaningful data for the brand to understand the impact. We've also done a similar study with a different partner. This one was with Place, with a large automotive company, where we were actually able to show, in this case, I believe it was a 27% lift in visits to dealerships. And if you've ever worked in automotive business before, you know how valuable that visit is. It's all about getting people to go to the dealership. Once they're there, the salespeople are on it. But a 27% lift in visits to a dealership is hugely valuable in the automotive space. And again, proof that this works. And then the final one to talk about is tune-in. So AT&T owns Uverse and DirecTV. And what they have the ability to do is understand, so I'm an AT&T customer. If my device goes past a billboard, they know, based on the cellular data, what the movement is and where I went. They also have the ability to connect that device ownership to a Uverse account or a DirecTV account. Now, I don't have Uverse or DirecTV at home, but if I did, what they'd be able to do is, in an anonymous way, not in any way described to me as an individual, again, separate their groups, exposed and unexposed. From both, do they have the Uverse or DirecTV account at home? And if so, what they watch? They have access to that set-top box data. And what we did a study with ESPN where we were able to show exposure for 5 different genres of programming at ESPN led to significant increases of viewership amongst the exposed versus unexposed. Very powerful, limited to those that are just focusing on tune-in accounts, but a good illustration of the ability to connect at-home exposure to mobile data in a way that helps us bring back to you more proof of effectiveness and more data that you can build into your own attribution models. A lot of small type on here. Are you all familiar with Tom's Shoes? Anyone who doesn't know, Tom's has a social mission. For every pair of shoes that you buy, they give a pair to someone in need. And what they wanted to know is out-of-home effective in delivering that message, that social message? And so this used the place methodology that I talked about before, pushing surveys to exposed versus unexposed. And what we saw is a 25% lift in awareness of their social mission amongst those that were exposed versus those that were not exposed to the advertising. And out-of-home was the only medium that was used in this. But because we were pushing surveys, it allowed us to go a little deeper and say, well, what else can we learn? And so what you saw is across the board, significant increases in the exposed audience versus the unexposed in key brand attributes like awareness, recall, purchase intent, desire to do research, word of mouth, talking with their friends about it. Overwhelmingly positive campaign for Tom's. And again, proof that this works. Lastly, coming to the close here. I talked about mobile before. The ecosystem was audience planning, attribution, and mobile amplification. If you're thinking about location, if you're thinking about reaching consumers using mobile, you have to be thinking about out-of-home at the same time. One of the things I like to talk about is in a mobile era like today, location is no longer about lat long. Location is about movement. Location is about understanding not just where someone is, but why they're there, the contextual environment they're in, what they're doing, what's surrounding them, where they were before and where they're going afterwards. And if you're thinking about location in that way, mobile and out-of-home are so effective together. And what we're doing is using mobile data to help you target using out-of-home, and now retarget using mobile. Pretty straightforward. Again, the three blue circle slide that I showed you, location, demographics, and behavioral audiences. However you started, whichever of those you use, what you end up with is out-of-home inventory that's going to drive your campaign. And what we're able to do now is say, let's take that inventory selection and simply geofence the boards, so make sure that people who are exposed to the out-of-home also have an increased likelihood of being exposed to a mobile ad later. Geofence the stores, the place you want to send them to, and the routes to get there, because you want to make sure that you're delivering that message and reinforcing that message throughout that journey, throughout that cycle. And then thinking about what are the other areas of the market that are important to you for your business that mobile can provide value. And I'll show you how that works in a second. From a creative standpoint, it's really easy. You can design an ad, provide it to us. We can design an ad for you like we do with a lot of our clients in out-of-home, or we have dynamic creative where you can give us assets and it gets rendered on the fly. Very simple program. 3 use cases. Retargeting out-of-home audiences, so targeting with out-of-home, retargeting with mobile, targeting the retail locations, and then the final one is filling in the gaps and providing additional reach and exposure. So remember I showed you the map of Chicago, the auto intenders? So here's a close-up of it. And the orange dots are the selected inventory, the green dots are the selected dealerships. What we can do with mobile is say, we want to make sure that when someone's exposed to that message via out of home, the next time they open their phone and we have the opportunity to deliver an ad to them, that we have the opportunity to deliver your ad. In other words, mobile becomes an amplification of out of home by delivering that message after exposure in a way that people have the opportunity to take action. And so it's literally as simple as building geofences around the boards. Very powerful, easy way of thinking about mobile and out of home together. But let's go a step further. You're trying to drive customers to your retail store. How do you do that? Well, you select inventory, mobile out-of-home inventory, based on a number of different ways. Location being one of them, audiences being another. You come up with that inventory. You're thinking about your retail locations. But you're probably also thinking about your competitors' retail locations. What we can do with mobile is not only fence the boards, like I showed you, but also the green dots are the retail locations. Fence those. That way, what you're doing is you're thinking about location-based marketing in a market in a holistic way. You're saying, I know who my customer is, and I want to reach them, and I'm doing that targeting based on a variety of different needs, including the mobile data. Now let's make sure that whether they're exposed to the out-of-home, they're exposed to our storefront, or really importantly, they're exposed to our competitor's storefront. Let's make sure that we have the ability to deliver that mobile ad to them consistently. Final use case for this. So you fence the boards, you fence the stores. Can't see it, but off to the right on the map, there are a couple of stores where we just don't have inventory there that works. Well, mobile becomes a really great way for you at low cost to extend that same targeting. This is all based on defining who your customer is and how to most effectively target them. And what we have the ability with mobile to do is say, we're delivering this campaign for you in a really effective way through the combination of out-of-home and mobile. And now what we can do is use mobile to fill in the gaps and say, even though we don't have inventory over in that far east side of the map, mobile becomes a way for us to make sure that we have the greatest likelihood of reaching our target customers through the combination of out-of-home and mobile. Make sense? It's a case study, a lot of data up here. I'll walk you through it. It's really simple. Boston market, around Thanksgiving, they do campaigns to reach people who don't have the time or the ability to cook Thanksgiving dinner on their own. And so they worked with us last year, Thanksgiving, to geofence their stores and say, within 5 miles of the store, let's deliver an out-of-home message telling people that you can get your Thanksgiving dinner from Boston Market. What we did in this case is we added the mobile geofencing to that. So we geofenced the billboard locations as well as the stores. And what we saw is a click-through rate on mobile that was 6 times the market average, the benchmarks for the industry, 6 times those benchmarks. And we ascribed that to one thing, which is the combination of out-of-home and mobile working together. It was so effective for them, they followed it up. Instead of just a Thanksgiving campaign, they had a Christmas campaign. It's a good illustration of the power of them together. I'm happy to talk to you about other examples and other use cases of this. But wrapping up, what I wanted to share with you is where we are with Radar, the development and rollout of this. So the timeline of this, as I mentioned a few months ago, we launched those 14 test audiences in 11 markets. We're now up to Q3. We're in the process of rolling out the 1,800 audiences against all of our roadside inventory in our 31 DMAs. As we get closer to the end of the year, what this is going to allow us to do is start to work with some of our bigger partners, be it agency or client direct, who've done their own audience segmentations. One of the reasons we selected PlaceIQ as our audience partner is because they're working with so many agencies and so many clients direct. And what this gives us the ability to do is to clients who haven't done that segmentation, who don't have a DMP and don't have an audience partner like this, we can bring you our audiences directly, and you can work with the segmentation that we provide to target effectively. But if you've done your own segmentation, either with PlaceIQ or on your own, we're working towards, by the end of the year, being able to build those custom audiences for you, or in the case of those that have done it without PlaceIQ, connect the PlaceIQ DMP to your agency or your client's direct DMP, and be able to pass the data back and forth. We're not a nonprofit, we're capital submitted. we have a vested interest here. We want to do more business with you, and we want to deliver results to you. And we know that one of the ways to do that is to take out of home and bring it into the 21st century as the way that the audience is to be targeted and the media can be planned and bought, and that's a key part of that. And then finally, as I mentioned, mobile retargeting, the way that we describe it, is available in all of our markets today. You can do that today. We have done that with a number of clients here over the last few months. You can do that in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and any other market that we work with you in. So bringing it home. Does out-of-home work? We hope you agree that not only does out-of-home work, but it works better than ever with this additional data, these additional insights. That's it. Thank you very much. Someone's got to have questions. There's got to be something that you want to know that I didn't cover, something you didn't believe, you don't understand. What can I tell you? Anyone? All right.
I'll ask one. So about all these different categories, you're going to have the ability eventually, do you think, to take 5 or 6 of them and make it custom for a particular client?
The key word is eventually, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It can be done manually now. So opening up the kimono a little bit more, what we get is composition numbers, right? And we index those against the market average. And so it's a manual process today, but we can take multiple audiences, take those compositions and add them up. It's not perfect, but it's directional. What I would suggest is another way of doing it is saying, let's look at those 5 audiences and see what the difference is as far as the inventory that comes out of it. Because I think what you'll find is if you're thinking of 5 audiences that have a connection between them, the data will probably back that up, right? So if you want to target McDonald's, Burger King, and Subway customers, there's a lot of overlap. Actually, Subway's a bad example. They're a little bit different. McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, they tend to have a similar type of a customer. You'll probably find the inventory rankings would be similar there as well. One thing I failed to mention, though, that we are working towards. Right now, this is a managed service. In other words, you got to talk to us and we'll help you with it. And we know that that's not scalable. And so we are in the process of building a tool that we're calling Seek. I'm happy to share with you guys a kind of beta version on my phone if you want to afterwards. I can show it to you. But it's a visualization tool today to help you look at our inventory. And that's it. You can search our inventory. Where we're going with Seek by the end of the year, hopefully, is all the demographic and behavioral data will be in there as well. And so that multi-pass approach that I mentioned of saying you could start with location or audience or demographic, you'll be able to do through a tool that you can access through a desktop, through a tablet, through a mobile device. The other thing that we're doing by the end of the year is building all this data into the tools that our teams use in-house. So we'll have the ability to more quickly come back to you with the analysis that you're looking for and the inventory recommendation based on that. Today, it is a little bit of a manual process. By the end of the year, we're hoping these tools will be in place. Any other questions? Yes?
How often is your data being updated in terms of like the auto-intended, the audience that you described is great, but if I'm, it's a 30-day leg time and I'm shopping for a car and I make my decision within 2 weeks, suddenly my data is outdated and your audience data is outdated, so how are you reacting to real time?
It's every 30 days.
Okay.
It is admittedly not perfect.
Right.
It is a first iteration of this.
Okay.
The more we perfect this, the more we use it, and really critically, the more that we prove that it's valuable to you all, the more we'll be able to do those updates. There is a desire from an industry through the TAB to get to audience measurement done on an hourly basis. That's probably about 3 or 4 years off. Right now, it's 30 days and it's a trailing number, so we're basically updating it every 30 days. Each audience, the window that is trailing, varies. So NCAA basketball, it's only based on people showing up at an arena during the basketball season. Auto intenders, it's every 30 days. So it does vary, but it is based primarily on the past 30 days. Yes?
How much are you able to drill down like the buying process? So let's say we've determined that we have an audience segment that is only out and about from the hours of 1 to 3. So are we able to buy on an hourly basis as opposed to a daily or weekly basis? And only pulse during those hours?
As of today, we're not selling our digital billboards based on day part. You day part creatively.
Sure.
So you have a slot and you can have different creative delivered during different times of the day. But as of right now, we are not selling based on day parts. The reason I'm saying it that way is there is a technical ability to do that, but it creates a real inventory complexity if people are only buying 2 to 4 or 3 to 6 or whatever. So we're working towards getting there, but right now it's more think day parting based on creative and messaging. That said, there's also ways that you can use digital out of home to dynamically change that creative. I didn't show you any of that stuff. There's some really cool things. If you haven't seen it, talk to your sales rep or talk to me afterwards. But really cool things that you can do with dynamically updated creative. I alluded to it in the Target campaign that I showed, but you can do with digital out of home. We can connect that to social media feeds, for example. So you can have tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram photos, things like that, dynamically pulled into your advertising. Curated, making sure that there's nothing inappropriate. It's all brand safe, but done in a way that's real dynamic. You can have creative that's tied to other triggers or other data. So you can run programs that incorporate weather as a trigger, sports scores as a trigger. You watch in the next couple of months the amount of digital billboards that you'll see with election results. It's all going to be a part of it. Right? All that stuff allows you to accomplish the kind of value that you're asking towards, just not literally by only buying into our wall. Any other questions? Yes?
Are there any kind of minimum spend, impression, number of boards that are required to be able to get the attribution reporting? And is there any additional cost to that?
Thank you. I appreciate you addressing two things that I completely forgot to talk about. Yes and yes. So the methodology we use for attribution is primarily based on observing mobile data. And what comes from that is a requirement that there be a sufficient reach to have enough of a sample to be able to have meaningful data. So what we do is we'll work with you on your campaign to say, is the weight sufficient? And if so, what's the right methodology? We have multiple attribution partners that we're working with. I mentioned Placement, Inrix, and AT&T. There's also a company called SSI that we work with. We're starting to work with Foursquare, who has a really, really powerful panel. But it's all panel-based. And so what that means is we have to make sure the message gets out to enough people that we can find enough respondents in the panel to give you meaningful data. We don't want to give you data that's based on 5 people giving answers to a survey or watching 5 devices. So yes, there's a minimum. It's typically based on a reach of somewhere between 25 and 50% in a market, but it depends upon the market because all of these panel-based companies, their distribution of panelists varies. So if you want to do research in Chicago, the weight that you need to deliver in Chicago to reach a sufficient size is different than if you want to do it in Des Moines. That's just the reality of the markets. As far as the cost goes, just like in the online world when you're doing attribution, there is a cost to that research. What we do is we work with you on what that cost is, so there's full transparency up front, and we empower all of our markets. And now I'm going to say this knowing that Roy and Susan will look at me, but it's ultimately up to them to decide how they want to handle the cost of the research in the context of the size of the campaign. Meaning a client that spends $10 million with us is probably not going to be charged for a study like someone who spends $50,000 with us. But it really varies. What we want to be able to do is talk to you about it and talk to you about what you're trying to learn. That's we had a conversation, Julie and I had a conversation earlier today about research. Typically what we want to do is ask you questions before we come back to you with a recommendation of what the right attribution solution is, because we need to know what you need to know. How do you measure success? What are the brand attributes that are important to you? Are you trying to drive people to specific retail locations or just increase volume of purchases overall? All of those kinds of questions will lead to the feasibility of the attribution study and the right selection of the partner and the right methodology. From a cost standpoint, attribution studies are typically somewhere between $15,000 and $50,000 and up. $50,000 and up is for large, multi-stage, multi-phase campaigns. $15,000 to $20,000 is typically what it would be for a 48-week campaign in a handful of markets. Any other questions?
The planning part of it, that's free though, right? Planning
Yes,
information.
thank you. Yes, the planning side is our investment in you. We are not charging for our audiences. There are a lot of media out there that charge for the audience segmentation of the data. Until you hear otherwise, we're not charging for it. It's a way that we want to provide you with more insights and more understanding, because ultimately, what we talk about sometimes is unlocking the power of out of home, and that's one of the things that we see that data can provide is those insights. So we don't charge you for that. We want to work with you on the audience planning for sure. Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll go one more.
Okay, great.
Just because.
I'll be here all night.
So, how familiar are you with what your competitors are doing? CBS or Upfront's OnSmart, what Lamar does with IUTA and Sage Data. Are you keeping a pulse on what they're doing and how they're bringing things to market so that eventually the goal would be there is some type of universal communication amongst all
Yes.
outdoor partners?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Let me give you the longer answer. And this is going to sound like a marketing guy talking like a marketing guy, but I really genuinely believe this. I feel like we are at a point of innovation in the out-of-home industry. That's kind of that storming phase, right? And I think it's healthy that Outfront, Lamar, us, we're all taking somewhat of a different approach to the same basic idea, which is applying mobile data to out-of-home to understand audiences and behavior. I can't speak to what they're doing, and I would never speak negatively of what they're doing. I speak to them. We talk through the OAAA, we talk through TAB, and I've been in this business long enough that Ian Dallimore from Lamar is a friend. We talk. I love what they're doing. I don't necessarily think that what they're doing is 100% the way that I would do it. Same thing with Outfront, but I love the fact that they're doing it. And I think ultimately you're 100% right. We will get to a point where the marketplace, you guys, will determine what the solution is, right? The demand from customers is what drives us from that innovation phase to settling into standards and norms, right? I think, right, but we're all doing the same basic thing. The QSR study that I mentioned before, Lamar also participated in that with the agency. And they took a slightly different approach. Their methodology was a little bit different than ours, but it was all based on the same ideas. The agency wanted to understand, did it work, and how we can measure how it worked. I think we'll get there. It's going to take a couple of years for it to settle. Any other questions?
You said the audience segments are expanding. Is there a guarantee which segments have seen more success?
So the 14 test audiences that we put out there, the ones that resonate the most initially are QSR and auto. Those are the two big ones. Not surprisingly, QSR and auto are big users of out-of-home. So QSR, I'll give you a good illustration of how this has been used. We have a client in Southern California, Del Taco. They're a fast food restaurant. They've been a client of ours for a couple of years. A couple of years ago, they realized that newspaper wasn't working for them. They took money out of newspaper, put it out of home. It's been working really well. What we did is we said, let's take a look at the data. Let's take a look at the QSR indexes for the campaign they've been buying from us and see, is there an opportunity for us to go back to that client and say, we can help you do a better job with the way you're working with us. What this did is open the door to something we've never had the ability to do before, which is optimization. We looked at their campaign. We ranked each of the posters that they were buying. It's 100% a poster campaign in the Los Angeles market. And we looked at the indexes. And the overall campaign that they were buying from us indexed just above 100, which meant it's solid. It's a good campaign. It means you're reaching the right people. But then what we did is we said, let's look at each individual location you're buying. And do any of them index lower than 100? And if so, is there a board near there that we can replace it that indexes higher? Because again, going back to QSR, the geographic coverage of all the franchisees, we can't just say, here's the best boards. It has to be the best boards for your business and your locations. And what we're able to do is move around about 20 boards in their buy in a way that the overall campaign went from an index of just about 100 to 127, I think is where we ended up. In other words, we delivered roughly 25% more efficiency in their campaign without asking for another dollar. This wasn't about getting more money out of our client. This is about going back to our client and saying, this data is powerful, and we can help you get more value out of the way you work with us. Obviously, our long-term goal is to have them spend more with us and to be a better partner and a longer-term partner with us. But optimization, something we can do. If any of you guys have been buying outside of this market, top-level markets, we can have that conversation around those 14 audiences today. A month or so from now, we can have that conversation about the local business and everything. Yes?
So when you have it broken down in a location that indexes high, like your Dallas, for example, there, and an advertiser has multiple products at multiple price levels, is say, these two offers you have based on this location index is high, it probably makes more sense for you to advertise with grade B that offers this offer versus grade A that offers another offer.
I love the use case that you're describing. Yes, absolutely. Because what this data does is it gives us deeper insights into the audiences that you can reach. And you're going to use that information, whether it's through consultation with us or not, to make decisions about the messaging, right? And if you have multiple creatives, absolutely. Understanding the location. So let's say you're choosing locations based on geography because you need to be able to target specific areas or stores. What the radar data allows us to do is come back and say, based on that, let's look at the different 4 creatives that you have and which appeals to each audience segment differently. I love it. It's a great idea. Great way of doing it. Other questions? Or additional use cases that I can roll into my sales pitch from now on? Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and your attention.